exciting. Incredible.
Hello my friends, I'm Kyle Thompson. This is Research Flat Earth. And as always, welcome back.
Bears is my shit. I loved it. It's a bear. It's a bear country.
Bears the whole time. Every book cover people have found, every clip from the show that people have found, have all said Berenstain Bears.
No, it's not.
Everybody remembers it as Berenstain.
It's not Berenstain Bears, bro.
Right now, she does not know what I'm calling her. And I think you guys should do the same.
Berenstain Bears? Who the fuck says that? Berenstain Bears. I don't remember it being the Berenstain Bears. No, it's the Berenstain Bears. Holy shit. But it was never Berenstain. But it was. Dude, this is a fucked up universe.
Now another very popular
here we go.
is Sex in the City. So
Sex in the City. I remember that show, bro. When I was like growing up, that show was popping.
No, it's been Sex and the City.
Bull. It's never been Sex in the City. I never watched it, but
where they called it Sex in the City.
No.
Nominees for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series are Kim Cattrall, Sex in the City.
Yeah. Dude, it's Sex in the City, bro.
Sex in the City. Cynthia Nixon, Sex in the City.
See, they're even
fucking crazy, but that's not the only thing.
They're even saying it.
Who goes by the name of The Whole World's Watching posted this.
Sex in the. I need to look this shit up, dude. I need to look this shit up.
Like cups and stuff, and they all say Sex in the City.
That's bullshit.
You want proof of the Mandela effect?
Yeah, bro.
Sex in the City.
We got.
No question.
This is my boy right here. This is my homie. He's out here.
Fucking evidence.
That's fucking evidence.
He's a
Definitely.
graphic designer. He made the fucking box. Plus the in.
He's like, he made the fucking box.
But thank God my girl still has every fucking thing in here.
Literally.
Again.
Sex in the City.
Again.
Wait a second, I'm looking this shit up. Alright guys, it's time for me to do some research. Sex in the City. It even has like Sex in the City, cast, Sex and the City. Everything is saying Sex and the City. No, it's not Sex and the City, bro. What the fuck? No, it's not. Sex in the City? No. Fuck you, universe. That's bullshit.
Another very popular effect is from the movie Snow White. And that's when the evil queen looks in the mirror and says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall."
Yeah.
Or
mirror, mirror on... Did this bitch just say magic mirror on the wall?
Yeah, she said magic mirror on the
wall.
No. We all remember
No.
And then in Forrest Gump, we all remember him saying, "Life is like a box of chocolates."
Yeah, life is like a box of chocolates.
Life was like a box of chocolates.
Fuck you.
Was like a box of chocolates?
Fuck you.
How come I don't remember?
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna
The
get.
most famous one is we all remember
Dude, this
Star
is
Wars and saying,
Luke, I am your father.
And we did. He told me you killed me. No. I am your father. He never even said Luke. This next one I just read about.
Fuck you. Fuck the world. No. Why? Why are they doing this? What is... How does this work? Sorry guys, I'm getting really pissed off right now. Anyway guys, if you guys would like to watch this original full-length video and go check out more Mandela effects, I'll have the link down here in the description. It just blows my mind. Like Berenstain Bears, Sex and the City, I am your father. He didn't even say fucking Luke. Oh my god. And magic mirror on the wall? No one said that ever.
My intention is to answer an intelligent question I've heard a few times about the Mandela effect, which some call the Mandela effect, but that's less representative. And to understand it, it will help you to know what a local minimum is. It's math term. If you don't know what it is, just pause this for a moment and do an internet search and find out what that is. Now here's a trend I've seen while watching YouTube videos on the Mandela effect. Lots of videos saying, oh my God, we're all going to die, the world is ending because Kit Kat doesn't have a dash. Just ugly, neurotic nonsense. But increasingly lately, I'm finding the people making some of the best content are handling it more intelligently and saying, well, things are changing, but why? And when I look at rainbow trees and a lot of other things, I think, well, maybe things are actually getting better. We have entered what you might call a new age, and we need a new world. And the Mandela effect is creating that. And so I've seen a lot more people making this recognition. And I have seen a lot more people, lately especially, saying this CERN stuff is nonsense. There's no way it can be CERN. This is a more subtle effect, has a greater sense of harmony to it. May not always make sense on the surface, but it has a greater sense of that all the pieces are fitting together, even if it's not obvious how yet. And so increasingly people are saying, one, this makes sense. Two, it's getting better. Three, relax and breathe. Try and enjoy some of the silliness. Four, it's not CERN. And five, it seems like a time traveler is doing this. And all those things are right. Making these changes involves making changes in the past. And there are intelligent questions about how could a time traveler move Australia. Let's leave those questions aside for now and answer a simpler question. The obvious question, probably most of you can think of it already. If someone went back in time, like in Back to the Future, and ran over a tree at the Twin Pines farm, when he got back, he would find that the Twin Pines Mall has become the Lone Pine Mall. And everybody who goes there will say it's always been the Lone Pine Mall, because it has. So why are you remembering the Dash and Kit Kat, or Mickey's suspenders, or Pikachu's tail? I mean, this is a really obvious question. Why are you remembering it? And you don't have to know. But maybe it will help some people to have an idea of how this is possible. Time is a self-correcting process. There's this tube, this stream of time running along, like a river floating in the multidimensional space, and you move along it. You're born into it, you move for a bit, you die. This is how it works. Now, if you were to go back and change one thing, a small thing or a big thing, it wouldn't matter. What would happen is there would be a ripple through the time stream. Right? This stream isn't magically being created as you make your decisions. The mathematics is more complicated. Your decisions change things, yes, but that happens across time. And if you think, I haven't made this decision yet, what about free will? You're getting caught up in this limited idea of time you live in. But when you can stand back and look at time not as a tiny little moment and lots of unknown future and lots of boring past, if you can see the time as a whole stream and work with the whole stream, you can understand this a little better. So you make that tiny change in the past, and everything after it in the time stream changes. Sort of a wave of change propagates through it. And if you make a random change, as it's propagating through, it's hitting other things and bouncing back and canceling itself out until the change you've made is undone. Right? This time channel has to pass through, it always has to sit in a kind of local minimum. And if you shift it, you have to shift it in such a way that it finds a new local minimum to sit in. If you make just a random change, think of, the ball on the graph kind of math thing. It's like putting the ball somewhere halfway up the slope and it will just roll back down to where it was. In order to make a change work, you need a few things. And I suppose it doesn't matter if I talk about those things, because not like anybody's going to repeat it. But you need to shift the time stream to a new local minimum. You need initial, meaning recent memory or slight, near future, anchor point. And you need the anchor point in the past when it's changed. Right? If that doesn't make sense, I apologize. It's the best I've got at the moment. So you find an anchor point in the past and an anchor point in the future. And then you strike that string that you've put tight between these two, and it makes a tone. And if the tone is the right length, if the string is the right length, the tone will vibrate back and forth like a guitar string. If it's the wrong length, and you try and strike that tone, it will cancel itself out, propagating back and forth. Right? So you need those two endpoints. You need the right tone. You need to move that time stream to a new local minimum. All of those things are necessary. Right? So what I have been doing, and if it bothers you when I say I'm doing it, what somebody's been doing is going back and making very careful changes to jump the time stream to the next level, the next local minimum, step by step by step, heading towards a world where we want to live. To make that, the initial point of change has to be very precise, and the place in history where the change is made and what's changed have to be made very precise, so that this change isn't just cancelled out by time itself, which is a self-healing process. Right? So someone's doing these things, right? Making these very specific changes. And what happens is, when those two endpoints are placed and the string tied between them, right, that string is there because the person in the present is reaching back in the past. It's their lifeline or whatever, like a scuba diver. When that's struck, that tone starts vibrating back and forth. And anybody in the present, or which in that, the end point of that, the local point of that string, who's a little more sensitive, a little more aware, can hear these tones vibrating back and forth. You've been wondering about the ringing in your ears. Well, here you go. Right? You're hearing this tone vibrating back and forth as the change is made. And eventually it will settle into a stable tone, and that change will be made in such a way it can propagate forward, and those two endpoints can be removed. Right? So we're talking about information, we're talking about data, about math. Essentially making the initial change and the final change is creating a mathematical process between the two, which you can see as a wave and hear as ringing in your ears. Once it's made and it's solid, that can be taken away, and that change will propagate down through the time, whether it's 40 years or 40,000. It will propagate down. And so people who are a little more aware, they're hearing that tone, that ringing in their ears, the sense of it, and it's allowing them to sense the change as it happens. And so they can remember what it used to be and what it is at the same time. Not everybody and not all the changes, but you can get some of them if you're paying attention. People who aren't that little bit more aware, who really believe that your world's just a hunk of rock floating in a vacuum around the sun, or maybe flat as a pancake and floating around the sun or something. People who believe it's a simple physical only thing don't have access to that higher awareness, can't hear the tone. And so they've got to wait until the change propagates forward. And so when it gets to them, they say, it's always been that way. I think you're crazy. I want to debunk what you're saying. Right? Now, I don't know if that makes any of this clearer, but at least it's an effort to make a very simplistic sort of your 3D world kind of example of what's going on in 6 or more dimensions while the shifting's happening. These two endpoints, the tone, the right tension between them, the right note, and this propagation across time. So yes, it's a time traveler doing this. It's somebody meddling with the time stream. Somebody's changing history and creating a different now. And what happens is that tone comes along and some of you notice it. Right? And that tone doesn't hit a single moment. Obviously, we're working across time. There's a kind of normal distribution of its effect spread out. And so there could well be someone in that time who remembers the old way and makes a picture or a Simpsons episode or something that copies the old way. And so when you look and say the Simpsons is still getting it right and, the Wizard of Oz is now getting it wrong, or at least changed, this is why. There was someone sensitive influencing it. But as that wave propagates through, right, as the past grows through to the present, eventually that change will cement in, and that will be the only reality that exists. It's only in the transitioning stage that you feel this dizziness, this, time shifting, this lack of control, this sense of distortion because things aren't what you remember. That's because you're working at a higher level. If you want it to stop, go back to believing the world is simple and physical and nothing else. Shut down those higher senses, and for you it will have stopped, though it's still going on, because you won't be hearing the tones. Does that make sense? Also, that tone struck on that string is struck for a reason. It creates what you can call a resonant frequency, bouncing back and forth. And so it induces that resonant frequency into the time stream, and that wave will propagate through time. Right? Even when those two endpoints are taken away, that wave propagates. Right? Back and forth. Until it, waving in more and more change until it stabilizes. So at any given point in that time stream, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, as that wave's passing, someone who's a little more sensitive may say, wait a minute, I have a sense that this used to be different, because they're feeling the wave of it passing through and not just looking at history. It's like electrons moving in a wire to create electricity. Electrons don't actually crawl down the wire. If they did, it would be very slow. The electricity jumps from electron to electron. It's this wave of electricity moving down a stable, say, copper wire, and the copper electrons aren't all peeling off and flying down there at the speed of light. There's some jostling, but they're mostly staying stable. Right? It's like that. There's this wave of energy moving through. And if you have a little higher level awareness, if you're not convinced the world's just boring and physical, then you can hear this, you can feel this wave. And it explains, for those of you who have experienced the nausea, it's like an earthquake going on underneath that most people can't sense. Things that seemed solid before are vibrating. If you look at the surface of the land in an earthquake, it actually makes these beautiful sinusoidal waves. It's not just crack, the world breaks and you're done. The ground will actually dance like waves on water. And so you're feeling this wave moving through time and space and thinking, wow, this is really weird, even though you're not seeing anything around you changing. It looks solid, but you feel this and you get nauseous. You hear this ringing in your ears. You feel dizzy, you feel confused, you feel out of place, or the world's out of place because it's vibrating all over around you. Yeah? And you don't have to have this. You can make yourself simple, forget the more important stuff in life, and live comfortable and pretend it's not happening and it won't bother you as much. But for those who can sense this, it's an amazing time. This is likely the only time in the history of this world that this will happen. And this is happening to repair some damage that happened a very long time ago and put the earth back to where it should have been, with less hairy people. Well, the former generations, Homo habilis, Neanderthal, whatever, would have propagated forward and you'd all look like monkeys now. You wouldn't have tails. See, but there are some changes, and one of those is that people are less hairy. It doesn't matter. It's not important. What matters is here's what's happening, this wave vibrating from a change that's made. And hopefully this answers why are we remembering it if a time traveler did it a long time ago. And the other thing that will answer is for those of you who are afraid. Well, if somebody's just going around making changes at random, they could screw everything up. No, time will heal itself. If they're making changes at random, if time travel's ever invented, they make changes at random, they'll screw things up, create little earthquakes in time, and it will have to go back and heal itself. And if they do it again, time's going to realize the only way it can heal itself is to stop them from having invented time travel. So when they're 6 and, deciding to go into physics, instead they're going to decide to be a surgeon or a gardener. And time travel won't be invented. Every time it's used wrong, it cancels itself out. Right? So there will not be people going back and making random changes. It takes a huge amount of awareness, a lot of understanding in a lot of different dimensions to make one of these time changes happen. And I've been watching. There's nobody else I've seen meddling with time. So if somebody tells you they're from 2049 and they know the future, they're wrong. They may be having an echo of a memory of something that will happen, like remembering a past lifetime but in the future. They may have echoes or memories of it, but they are not time traveling. This isn't happening. Time doesn't allow it. There are, right this moment, changes going on in the physical body. And I don't make this as a recording to be published, just as quick notes so that we can notice what's happening. It is interesting to note that humans are excessively emotional, and these changes appear to be changing the parts of the body that affect emotion. And we're likely to find tomorrow that, feeling cold is part of the change. Don't take it personal. The nausea also. That tomorrow humans are much less damaged by the emotions from their past. That things will have just disappeared because the body can't support them anymore. You may remember having spent your whole life angry or frustrated or annoyed, but simply not be able to feel those anymore. The last big change seemed to be bones, structures, mostly. This feels like a bigger change, but may not show up as quickly because this is the soft stuff. I felt the lungs change from the inside and breathing get easier. I felt interstitial ligaments, connections between the ribs changing, and briefly felt something towards the bottom of the rib cage on the side change. Strangely, it's not happening bilaterally. I feel it first on the right, and then maybe later on the left. If not, then for a short time we're going to find that humans and maybe other animals are imbalanced, having different structures on the right than on the left, until the left side one hits. The Achilles tendon has been a weakness in almost everybody. It tends to shorten up if not stretched regularly. People who wear high heels, it tends to shorten up. A lot of people have pain in the Achilles tendon. I felt that change. Human heads are a bit bigger than they need to be. If they were animals, they could have smaller heads, but to become smarter, they need to be a little bigger. And so I feel a lot of tendons, I think, in the neck, in the shoulders, up through the back of the heads, up above the ears. I feel them changing to make the neck stronger and better support the weight of the head. There was a report about muscles around the eyes. If so, that would be good. So many people are nearsighted or farsighted, and if those little muscles are better, maybe people will have better eyesight. I'd personally like to see the ears get bigger, at least on the inside, so they don't get full of slime so quickly. Right now I feel a lot of things. Up and down the back, between the ribs, around the spine, It's almost like somebody's unhooking things and rehooking them in different ways to make them stronger. Human bones and muscles are weaker than, say, other primates. A human wrestling with a chimp would always lose. It's as if the muscles themselves are badly constructed. Maybe it's ligaments, maybe it's tendons, maybe it's attachment points on a bone, I don't care. But it's possible that all of those are changing so that humans will be bigger. Probably the only people who would notice such a thing are Mandela people who lift weights. Because suddenly they'll find their numbers have gone way up. Possibly parents will notice it in lifting children. But the rest will probably miss this because they'll have always been stronger, and so their standards will be different. The weight of things will be different because humans will be able to handle more weight. Right now I feel the forearms changing. I feel really cold in this, but somehow I think that's part of the change, so I'm not trying to get warmer. It has struck me that humans have a very tiny comfort range. It gets down to 18 to 20 Celsius and humans are shivering and putting on extra clothes. It gets up to 24 or 26 and people are sweating and complaining it's hot. I know we can easily live in the tropics up to 40 and live in the cold ranges where it gets very cold, but when a human is naked, they have a very tiny tolerance range. I'd love to see that tolerance range grow so they can stay warmer in the cold and be more comfortable in the heat. And that wouldn't show up in the bone structure, so it may not get noticed. But you may find that you're less sweaty and gross when it's a tiny bit warm and less shivery and weak when it's a tiny bit cold. If so, then there's a theme here. One, emotions are changing so we're not so easily overwhelmed or frustrated. That is, humans are growing more stable and finding a broader range of emotions they can be comfortable in. Humans are growing more stable and finding a broader range of temperatures they can be comfortable in. And as their bodies become stronger, they're physically finding a broader range. The fingers are becoming thinner, so a more fine range things they can touch and handle. And yet heavier things they can lift. Yeah, I don't understand that. Human eyes are really bad, so maybe they're discovering a broader range, so that like hawks they can see things at a greater distance, but they can also see up close and notice colors and find details better. That'd be good, because there are a lot of better colors out there and people are missing them. All of these things are, humans are developing a broader range where they can function and be comfortable. So they can experience and enjoy more of their lives, rather than spending their lives being emotionally frustrated, physically overheated or cold. Perhaps vestibular system nausea. Just a broadening of all of the pieces of the human experience, or say more carefully, experiential range. They may experience a little more, but they'll be more comfortable with all that they experience. Humans were horribly designed, amateur, shitty, should be banned from being an engineer, kind of engineering job. So that they were always too hot, too cold, too stinky, too messy guts. They were always struggling with everything and found it a great effort to be happy. If this pattern is, that's not correct. If this pattern is indicative, then humans will find far easier to be happy, comfortable, alive, far less provoked by poisonous plants or mosquitoes, or far less disturbed by emotional extremes, far more stable. Other creatures fit, breathe, other creatures fit in the larger structure of biology because they're not constantly being hurt or offended by it. Humans were artificially created, so they were always being hurt, offended, bothered by so many things. A little mosquito bite and they might have 2 days of itching, and then emotionally they couldn't handle it, so they'd have 2 days of angry or frustrated. But now, perhaps they can relax a little more and experience life. Lay in the grass without getting some sort of itchy rash every day. Exercise without getting all sweaty and smelling bad. Just this much larger experiential range where they can be comfortable and at ease. I definitely felt the feet change. Somebody pointed out recently that my feet looked more stable or attractive than most. And I watched a video of current Neanderthals, the hominids that seem to exist. And somebody said, look at their footprints. Their footprints are strong and stable when they walk. Humans' feet roll in and out, and they're all kind of unbalanced. I think that video will disappear, or at least that part of it. Because human feet will be like the Neanderthal feet, built to handle this world. It's possible, well, we'll see. It's possible that for a time we'll see the world population increase because humans aren't so easily wiped out by sickness and crippled by walking long distances and able to survive in more environments. It's still going to drop to probably around 10% of the 9 billion it was once up to, but for a short time we may see the numbers fluctuate up a bit. I feel, if you've ever used a soldering iron, that kind of focused heat up and down the ribs on the sides underneath where the arms would hang if you were standing. It's like somebody's going through and soldering in different things. A little burst of intense and very painful heat as each one is reconnected. But it's not just one after another. It's more like watching somebody very skilled playing piano, how their fingers are jumping all over the keyboard. These little changes up and down. The lordic arch in the lower back is a problem. Also the feet pointing too far in, pigeon-toed, or too far out, walking like a duck. Those things are a problem because they affect physical health, ability to walk, they cause pain, they limit people in athletics, and I feel changes happening in the structure of the pelvic girdle, which will make it easier for people's feet to point forward as they should and not out to the side or inward. I was born with my feet pointing at each other and wasn't able to walk, would never have been able to walk if they hadn't put me in a lot of reparative stuff early. I don't feel that will happen as often or perhaps at all. And I doubt most anyone can feel it, but from the way the feet point, whether they point forward or in or out, whether they pronate or supinate, whether they roll to one side or the other, that this propagates all the way up through the pelvic girdle and strongly centers in the lower back, and then reflects upward into below the shoulders and up to the shoulders. So that slight change in the way the feet point, change posture entirely. People who had sore backs or weak backs or muscle troubles their whole lives because their feet point slightly off and they didn't know this. All of those things will change, and all of them center around what seems to be happening in the pelvic girdle, slightly affected by the stupidly weak ligaments, that the cruciate ligaments in the knees, and also impacted by the Achilles tendon. A lot of athletes have been wiped out from athletics because of a torn ACL. These knee tendons are likely changing, along with this pelvic girdle shifting to create the entire system more stable, more strong, more balanced. I often had an experience as a child in classes where children would pick teams, and I was always the last person picked because my body was so badly designed. What I expect is that range will decrease. We have, now I admit my age in this because I only know older names, but we have people like Bruce Jenner who can run so impossibly fast no one can believe it. Or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's so tall and has these big hands, he's good at basketball. We have other people who are fat and asthmatic and weak and pale and can barely walk. We have this huge range as humans, as the theme here seems to be an expanding of experiential range for the species, but also for the individual, and that if there's a larger range you can function in effectively, then this narrow range where you can be successful will broaden, and we'll find that more and more children are good at sports and don't have to feel weak or embarrassed because some kids are good and some people suck. It should lead to more of a homogenization of physical experience, rather than some people being tiny and picked on or weak and asthmatic, and some being big oafs and some being graceful and good athletics. We should see a greater functionality. Smaller people are just as good at physical stuff. Tall, skinny people just as good. The more sumo wrestler type build. All of these people being more functional. If this idea is correct, it'll be fascinating to watch it happen, and it'll be a great thing for kids. The trouble breathing isn't about the lungs. It's around the center of the breastbone, whatever it's called, where the ribs link in. The interstitial tendons are being soldered there, and it's being mirrored by pain in the neck, shoulders, back, as those tendons are being linked in a stronger and more healthy way. There are people I've known who can stand on one foot and point the other foot at the ceiling, or do the splits, or suck their own cock. I mean, some very flexible people. And others, like myself, who couldn't touch their toes. What I expect to see, well, what I'm guessing, well, let's not call it a guess, it's more than that. A scientific rather than psychic prediction based on data is that everyone will be more flexible, everyone will be able to do yoga, everyone will be able to do martial arts, because I'm feeling a lot of flexibility being built into the ribs, the pelvic girdle, the bones of the legs, and the muscles that link those things together. I'm expecting to find that it propagates down the arms, but I haven't noticed it yet. It's as if the first change changed the deep stuff. It changed the guts, moved the liver and kidneys a bit, changed the skeletal structure. And this is getting more intermediary things like tendons and ligaments and the fascia around groups of muscles. And if that's correct, then the tertiary, the third and maybe not final, but the third significant change will be more surface things. That everyone will look a little more harmonious on the surface, that humans will become more generally beautiful. There won't be a handful of beautiful and a lot of ugly people. Probably in that third change, we'll see a lot of the unnecessary body hair disappear. Somewhere in there, we'll see human odor becoming less because they won't be fighting the bacteria. They'll be more woven into the biology. Humans have always been separate from the biology of the planet because they were artificially created. Many things make them sick, many bacteria, many viruses fight them. If it's in that third stage, but if that's correct, we should see the flu almost disappear. The sniffles, allergies, lots of people with allergies because people don't fucking belong in this world. People were wrong and the world was right. But in that third change, we should see most of asthma disappear. We should see allergies to plants and so on. So, in that third stage, humans will grow a lot more beautiful and a lot less hairy and won't smell as bad. But in this second, this intermediary stage, my guess is a lot of people will fail to notice it at all. Because you can see the bones of someone who died a long time ago and call yourself an archaeologist and pretend you're a real science even though you're idiots. And you can see the skin. You can see if someone's got healthy hair or limp hair or balding or frizzy out of control hair. You can see that surface stuff. You can see the deep stuff. This intermediary change is far huger than either of those. But who knows anything about their ligaments or their tendons? Maybe a handful of massage therapists or chiropractors, but probably people will overlook this. They'll just suddenly find that it's easier to go through their day and easier to handle their emotions and easier to handle temperature. This is in its own way the biggest of the three. The deep structure, the skeletons laid the surface, the groundwork for it, like the foundation of a building. And the next one will be the painting of the building or the brickwork or whatever surface stuff. But this is the big one. This is the building of the building. And those are the things people never see. They see a big hole dug in the ground and the foundation built. And when the building's built, they see the outside and they live in it or work in it. But they fail to notice how the air conditioning system's built or how it's wired or all the important things that actually make a place livable. These appear to be those kind of changes. I encourage you to sit up straight and breathe, because there is nausea, the animal may want to panic here. I mentioned this, but it may have been before I started recording, that I felt this same set of changes happening in rodents, like a mink or small animals, which means phylogenetically way back in history changes are happening as well. And that would not be that humans are badly designed. Obviously, that's long before humans evolved, those changes are landing. But I feel them now. That's simply, deep breath, that's simply that this world grew up in a place of shadow. And so a lot of the things that have evolved have been out of balance, aggressive, savage, primal, and so on. The reasons that would be interesting is that your cats and your dogs, your household pets, will live longer. The whole biological system will have to rebalance because animals live longer. Animals will probably become smarter and possibly even evolve intelligence a little earlier because they're living longer, but no promises on that. I know from my study of biology that there are links that connect the vertebrate together, or the ribs, but they connect across the back or across the front. I actually feel something connecting from the front of the ribs to the back of the ribs. I don't know that that has existed before. Oh, there's the arms. I feel it in the elbows. Most people don't realize it, but elbows are very stupidly designed, very weak, very vulnerable. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever bumped it. Just a slight bump and the whole forearm goes numb. And if you're trying to, say, do curls with a barbell, just listen, don't try to understand. That the elbows are a big limit as to how much you can lift. Speaking of that, the purpose of lifting weights is to damage the muscles, because the only way to make them grow stronger is to damage them. And the body said, oh, I guess I need to grow stronger. And yet a chimp is still far stronger than humans, and you don't ever see them lifting weights. Humans have been badly designed. They get weak and frail, look like something out of a concentration camp if they're not constantly exercising and working out, or they become fat and disgusting, like something out of Louisiana trailer park if they don't exercise. Let's say a probable theory coming out of this is that humans will be stronger and healthier and more graceful. Even if they don't work out, they will be flexible. Even if they don't stretch, they won't become obese. Even if they do eat too much junk food and don't exercise, humans will become stable in a functional place, instead of having their stable points being weak and impossibly scrawny or obese. The stable point will be a healthy place. You rarely see, when humans have them, of course, but you rarely see obese cats and dogs. You rarely see them too weak to move because they never get up and stop watching television. You don't see this in orangutans, ostriches. Humans should be moving into this place where they're strong and muscular and healthy and beautiful. Not Conan the Barbarian strong, but like a chimp, that even if they just sit around and watch television, they could still, if they were to arm wrestle a modern human before these changes, they would still hold their own. That even people who don't exercise will be strong and graceful and able to dance or run or breathe or play, which, if I'm correct, should bring about far greater beauty, should bring about far greater joy, because anybody can jump up and dance or jump up and wrestle with their kids and not have to worry about their muscles being weak or their fat body handicapping them. Body fat is still useful and in some cases attractive. A person who's healthy has a little body fat, and seeing the curves on a female human can be very attractive. But body fat's out of control. Far too many people with a big fucking belly or a huge ass cellulite by the time they're 12 or 13. That stuff needs to disappear. It's possible this working will get rid of most of it. And the next one, the surface working, will sort that stuff out. I feel, not just here, but in a larger sense, anger, impatience, frustration. That is because if you spend your life angry, that anger gets into your bones, into your ligaments, into your tendons, into the body fat. Obese people almost always carry a lot of ugly emotion in the fat. As the bodies are changing, those buried, that shit is coming out. And it should just evaporate. Like dew on grass as the sun comes up, it should just evaporate and disappear. I feel disgust, again, not just locally, but in a large sense, and that's reasonable, because the human body has been something that provoked disgust. And if it becomes a thing that is more graceful and beautiful, then it won't provoke that. If everyone looks more like a model and functions more like an athlete. If everyone will, probably the third change, if everyone, their mind will start working better, and then become smarter and start to ask questions and function less as lazy, stupid automata, and more as intelligent, aware beings. If everyone is healthier and so on, then they would look back at what people were not that long ago, and they will feel a sense of revulsion or disgust, and the majority of humans feel that every time they shit, every time they look in the mirror, every time they get sweaty and smell bad, every time they have sex. And that must disappear, and I feel it going. But as it comes up, I feel that disgust coming out. So when the feeling is there, it's not a bad thing. It is people releasing it. It's like being in an auditorium with, 200 people and everybody farts at the same time. It smells a little gross for a while. I realize that I normally talk a little more gracefully, and I'm talking about farting and taking a dump and so on, and body odor. But these are biological changes, so I'm trying to convey them with a little integrity and clarity. And that means talking about 200 people in a room farting at the same time. And that all those people are suddenly, they no longer have sort of gas pains in their guts. But for a little while the room smells stinky. Long and short, because I may stop this here. Long and short, this slight transition's messy like being born. But once you clean off some of the blood and slime, you've got a beautiful new life. So there's a little messy here, a little painful and bloody and gross. But as this change lands, the first change that people were so freaked about, your skeleton used to be just discs, just little round discs that stacked on top of each other, and people were always dislocating discs or having a disc get crushed and spending the rest of their life in pain. Now the skeleton looks like something out of a Geiger drawing, all the weird protrusions coming out of it. It is so much stronger. And especially the lower back, the skeleton's more than twice as wide, the spinal column is more than twice as wide as what it was. The hips used to look like these beautiful smooth planes that maybe were pretty but not functional, and now they also look like something out of an alien movie as they connect into the spinal column and the sockets for the I've lost the bone name, the hip bones where they socket in. The jaw used to have this problem. They now look a little more large and clunky, but because of it, they're not vulnerable in the way they used to be. And that's cool. I don't know know where I was going, so I'll start over. The first change was structural, and it looks a little ugly to see it, but it makes you far more powerful and effective. This change is the important one. This is the massive change, everything about humanity change. And the next change will be just simple surface stuff, and the surface stuff people will care a lot more about. Moles or birthmarks they've had their whole life will disappear. People who've been bald from an early age will have hair. Everyone will look more beautiful. We won't see misshapen faces and clumsy people nearly as often. There's a broadening of the range and a homogenization or narrowing of the expression within that range. You will still see baldness, generally amongst people who are doing things in shadow. You'll still see ugly features, crippled things, and so on. But it will be in every case, an indication of somebody who's shadow, who's ugly on the inside. And so those who are most extreme in their ugliness and their creation of hate and shadow will look more and more ugly. They'll age faster, and it will be obvious on the outside. This will become more apparent in the final working and the third working. And you'll see far more grace, beauty, health, ability to dance. You'll find people living 100 years longer. Right now they live to 50, 60. They will eventually live to 300, but for now expect 140 to 200 to be a human age range. Again, this could lead to a short-term spike in human population, but it will quickly equalize down to a much lower and more manageable number. I'm going to stop describing this for now, because that's enough detail. But there's clearly more.
If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you haven't subscribed, hit the red subscribe button. Also click on the little bell icon to get notifications of my flat earth videos, which I upload every day.